Welcome to the second episode of the Queensland Conservative. It's great to have your company. I want to thank so many of you who sent positive feedback about my first foray into the world of podcasting. More than 6,600 people viewed the Queensland Conservative on Facebook alone over the past week or so thanks for your support. The Queensland Conservative is available as an audio podcast on Whooshkaa for those who like that format, or on YouTube. Each section is fed out over a couple of days on Facebook, so there are plenty of opportunities for people to like and share this content, which I believe has the potential to change our nation for good. I'd love it if you would join me on my quest to become a Conservative Senator to represent our great state of Queensland. Together, we can burst the Canberra bubble and bring about the Conservative revolution our nation so desperately needs. In this week's edition, I talk about why the Greens in the Senate are the problem and the Conservatives are the answer. I catch up with Conservative Party leader Senator Cory Bernardi, who was in Queensland last week. You'll enjoy our chat. He's a very incisive man. I continue to highlight inconvenient truths about global warming alarmism, and I let you in on a Twitter exchange I had with a leading same-sex marriage activist. All this and more in this week's edition of the Queensland Conservative. I'm running for the Senate because we have to change the balance of power in Parliament. If we don't, the Greens will continue to drive our economy over a cliff and erode our basic freedoms. This might seem like a strange thing to say when we all know that it is either Labor or Liberal that form government. That is true, but we need to take a closer look at from where the thought leadership in public policy is coming. For too long, the Greens have been the tail that has wagged the policy dog. Both major parties have followed the Greens' lead on electricity policy and on rainbow social policy. The media love these agendas, and weak politicians from both sides have allowed themselves to be swept along. That is why our electricity prices are through the roof, why basic freedoms are under threat, and cultural Marxism is on the rise. Here's just some of the Greens' agenda. They want to shut down our biggest export industry, the $65 billion coal industry. They want no more new coal-fired power stations built, a policy the Coalition Party Room unanimously agreed to just before they ousted Malcolm Turnbull. They want your children taught gender-fluid theory at school. They want restrictions on freedom of speech, freedom of religion. They want the loathing of our history, our flag, and Australia Day. Now, varying shades from dark green to pale green have mixed with Team Red and Team Blue. The antidote to the green toxin in our politics is principled Conservatives in the Senate. Before May next year, we will go to the polls to choose between Bill Shelton and Scott Morrison to lead the country for the next 3 years. After a lost decade in Australian politics, this will be the most important election in a generation. We will also vote for senators whose job it is to represent their states and to keep a watch over the House of Representatives. Who would you rather have watching your back in the Senate? The Greens or a group of principled Conservative Party senators with the courage and the resolve to do what's right? Apart from the Greens, we've seen all sorts of other groups elected to the Senate in recent years as well. Like fireworks on Cracker Night, most flame brightly before fizzling out. The Conservative Party, led by Senator Cory Bernardi, is making history by giving Australians a genuine Conservative choice in the Senate for the first time. You can vote Team Red or Team Blue in the House of Representatives, and then you can take out third-party insurance in the Senate by voting Conservative. I'd rather see Scott Morrison's Team Blue win, but this is looking bleak after the Coalition followed Labor's folly and knifed 2 Prime Ministers. Labor is almost in lockstep with the Greens and would be a disaster for our nation. Conservatives can help thwart the Labor-Green alliance by opposing their agenda in the Senate. And if Scott Morrison wins, we can help stop the mission drift in the Coalition. Either way, the Conservative Party is your third-party insurance in the Senate. I'm Lyle Shelton. You're with the Queensland Conservative. This is the Queensland Conservative. I'm Lyle Shelton. Thanks for joining me, and thanks for being part of my journey as I run for election to the Senate over the next few months. Now you'll see from the calibre of my next guest why I'm so keen to be a Conservative senator for you and for our great state. Senator Cory Bernardi is the founder and leader of the Conservative Party, and I managed to grab him for a quick chat while he was in Queensland last week. He explains why he started the Conservative Party, and he talks about what he calls the age of experimentation in Australian politics. And just for a short moment, we allowed ourselves to consider just what might be if the dream is achieved. I'm privileged to have a very special guest with me, none other than Senator Cory Bernardi. Cory, welcome to Queensland.
Thanks so much, Lyle, and you've upgraded me. I'm the podcast person, you're the vodcast person.
That's right, Cory, you got to get with the times, mate.
Yeah, old-fashioned values, mate, that's me.
It is. So, Cory, great to have you in Queensland. We're here, obviously, getting support for the party and for the election. Just tell some of our viewers, just remind them, why did you feel that you needed to start the Conservative Party after all those years as a Liberal Party senator?
Well, it's frustrating to have to explain it, but you just have to look at what's going on around the country. You realise that politics hasn't worked for us and that the Liberals have lost the plot. They don't understand what they are anymore. Are they a pale imitation of Labor? Are they a slightly less bad version of them? And every time I reminded them of how to be them better selves and say, you know, families are important, mums and dads are important, that taxes should be lower, government should be smaller, they'd run off to the press gallery and tell them what a terrible person I was. So I figured if they don't want me, the Australian people deserve better. And I really think politics needs some reform and rehabilitation.
Well, there's no doubt since you came on the scene, great momentum is built with this party. And you and I have had this discussion before. We're not trying to wreck the Liberal Party in any way. Obviously, there's some deficiencies and it needs to be, brought back to its true values. That's why we're here. But our strategy at the next election is not to undermine the Liberal Party, is it? It's really to try and get that base in the Senate.
No, that's the thing. We don't want to replace the Liberal Party, right? It's proven, or it's given that either the Liberal Party or the Labor Party will be the party of government at the next election. The question is, how are you going to manage their failures and their weaknesses? How are you going to stop them indulging in, chasing every shiny object down every borough because they think there's an electoral success in it for them? And the only way you can do that is not by holding them to ransom, but by working in the Senate with a block of people that share common values, share conservative values and principles, and are going to make whomever forms government their better selves. Now, clearly, I'm a Liberal. I'm a former Liberal. But the Liberal Party no longer has my values, but I can influence and shape how they go about their business by sitting outside them and reminding them what they should be doing.
It's probably fair to say, Cory, that the Greens and Green Left ideology is probably the real enemy of Australia at the moment, and it's the drift of the Liberal Party to some of those green ideas, like the idea that there should be no more coal-fired power stations in Australia, which is the Liberal Party policy under Malcolm Turnbull. That's a Greens idea, but so often the Liberals are doing the Greens' bidding.
Oh, isn't it frustrating? I mean, you go back 10 or 15 years, it was these extreme ideas. We were laughing at the Greens by saying gender was not determined or coal was evil. And then it's slowly been embraced by the Labor Party and now the Liberal Party. And, it's appalling when you think the Liberals have put in charge of themselves, or put in charge of their party, someone who was seeking to be a member of Labor in the first place. They had these two coups, they repeated all of Labor's mistakes, and who knows where it's going to end. The only way we can get sensible and stable government, I think, in this country is to have a sensible and stable Senate that will put some influence on the party of the day who's forming government and say, hey, the Australian people deserve better. There is a better way. And naturally, I'm going to say you need to be part of that team as the Australian Conservative.
I was hoping you'd say that, Cory. Is this election really our Conservative moment? I mean, we've seen a Conservative revolution in the United Kingdom with the Brexit vote. We've seen the Trump phenomenon, whatever people think of Trump. But and then we're seeing in Germany a big pushback on the establishment there. Something's going on globally. People are disaffected with mainstream politics. What do you think our chances are of really harnessing that feeling here in Australia?
Well, I'd like to say pretty good. I mean, there's a growing group of people who want an alternative to the major parties. Now, there's lots of pretenders to the Conservative mantle. There's only one party that is the Conservative Party, and that's us. But, there is a range of personality cults out there, some of which have elements of conservatism in them, but others have none or have counter positions in any number of important areas. So we need to demonstrate to the Australian people that choosing outside of the major parties is not just a protest vote. It has real influence and real impact. And the question is, do you want that to go to a party that's principled, that's proven, that's demonstrable, and can demonstrate this great history of, or a history of consistency through their policy platform? Or do you want one individual just making it up as they go, and one day they'll say they're Arthur, the next day they say they're Martha? That might be the Greens' approach, but it's not the way to run a balance of power party in the Senate.
Yeah, no, that's good, having that principal position there. When you first became a senator over 10 years ago, did you think you would find yourself in a situation where our nation is looking at having an unreliable energy sector, where we face blackouts every summer, where people's electricity bills are through the roof, and where you mentioned the gender stuff, where schools are now teaching children their gender is fluid? I mean, what has gone on in Canberra in the last 10 years that we're at this point?
Oh, there must be something in the water, I tell you, because people lose their common sense when they get to Canberra. I was asked this in my very first interview, actually, on the ABC when I became a senator. Oh, would you ever consider crossing the floor? And I said, well, of course I'll consider it, but I can't see any reason to when you've got people like John Howard and Peter Costello and Nick Minchin and Alexander Downer. These were people with principles. They were credible. They understood politics very well as well. Let's not get past that. But there was a sense that they really believed in something. How many politicians of the current crop, in government or outside of government, can you say really believe in what they're doing, that they have the nation's interests at heart? Politics is now for the self-absorbed. It's about where the politicians are seen as a world apart from the everyday people. We don't care about electricity prices, even though that's all they care about out there. It's I don't know. It's like a dual world, a parallel universe.
How did we get to this then? This is a short period of time. You've mentioned some of those great conviction parliamentarians of the past. What's gone on? Why has our decline been so rapid?
It's hard to know. I think there's been increasing number of pressures on politicians. It's a 24-hour media cycle. There's the desire to always be loved, and no one wants to pick a fight anymore, because the language that's used if you choose to take a counterintuitive approach or anti-zeitgeist approach is very negative. You're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're an ism. There's something they can make up for your position to basically say you're out of touch. And that becomes very popular through the mainstream media, through the university courses, through the school system. It catches on, and it's about character assassination. So if you go back, this is the left's method or modus operandi. I think Saul Alinsky wrote The Rules for Radicals. Discredit your opponent at all costs, because then no one will listen to their argument. And politicians are gun shy of that. Now, I've often said I got into politics to do some stuff, not to be someone. And I've been monstered by the best of them, and I'm still coming out the other side. So, you've got to have that courage of conviction. I'm really fortunate that I've got a good team behind me, a loyal team. I've got a family that is stronger and more resilient than any I could ever wish for. They're amazing. And so that allows me to continue to do what I do, and hopefully get some people who believe in that message, like you and others around the country, right on board.
Well, Cory, let's just, none of us are getting carried away with ourselves. We know we've got a big mountain to climb in this journey to the next election. But just say the dream is realised. Let's let our minds go there without being complacent. What do you think the Conservatives can do if we do achieve that critical mass of senators there after May next year?
Well, it's extraordinary. If we got 4 or 5 senators elected, all of a sudden you'd have a Labor government unable to pass legislation even with the support of the Greens. They'd need the coalition or the Australian Conservatives to do it. That's an unbelievable ability to influence political outcomes for the positive, not for self-indulgent reasons, but for the positive for the country. And that means you give the government of the day, latitude to do what they want, but it's got to be consistent with what's in the national interest. But if a coalition's in there, it would also mean that they would need to deal with us as well. And the question for every person out there is, who do you want to be in that position? Do you want the Greens to be dominating what's going to happen in the shape of the country for the future? Or would you prefer the Conservative position, which is one about incremental change, about taking the tried and tested route rather than the experimental one? Because the experiment of the last 10 years, in fact, the experiment of the last 3 decades or 4 decades in world politics hasn't done us particularly well. We've got the issues that were failed to be addressed all those years ago are still with us, and other issues have arisen as a consequence of inaction or too much government action. We learn the lessons of history, and we're going to keep applying them to modern day real-world decisions.
Well, Cory, hopefully we can all together drain the swamp or burst the bubble, as you put it. We're in Queensland today. The weather's perfect. Anyone would think there's not a problem in the world being here.
It's a pretty good spot, I have to say, and there's something about Queensland. They're the most optimistic, resilient, almost independent bunch, I think, in the country, but it's great to be here.
That's us. Well, thanks, Cory, and I know so many of our viewers really appreciate your courage and the stance that you've taken, and the fact that this movement is on the scene, and we're all excited and energised about the upcoming election. So thanks for talking to the Queensland Conservative.
Thanks very much.
You're with the Queensland Conservative. Stay tuned. Well, welcome back to the Queensland Conservative. I'm Lyle Shelton. We have no hope of lowering electricity prices while the political class is captured by global warming alarmism. Last week, more inconsistencies came to the surface. The head of the Australian Conservation Foundation, Kelly O'Shannessy, enthralled the uncritical Canberra media with an address at the National Press Club. She said her organisation was making the upcoming federal election the climate election. Karen Phelps, who was the recent Wentworth by-election winner, was on hand to reinforce the message. I don't believe the Australian population will tolerate a government going forward without a comprehensive policy on climate change, Phelps told ABC Radio. By lunchtime, O'Shannessy was predicting the end of the world. If we continue to burn coal and gas for decades to come, we will kill the 1.5 degree Paris target. We will not have a habitable planet for hundreds of millions of people, and they will die. This is what O'Shannessy told the Press Club. Now here's the thing. Even under Labor's 50% renewable target, it is envisaged that Australia will burn coal for decades to come. Sure, under coalition policy, it is uncertain if new coal-fired power stations will be built, but certainly under Labor, no new coal-fired power stations will be built. The point is this: it will be decades before all our coal is turned off under current plans by both parties. Only the Greens, it seems, offer us salvation, for only they will shut down coal before the planet dies. Now let me just say up front, I believe realpolitik will kick in, and it won't matter who is in government, new coal-fired power stations will be built. If not, nuclear power or gas-fired power will be built. But under O'Shannessy's doomsday scenario, reported without scrutiny by the Canberra Press Gallery, we are doomed if Australia continues to burn coal and gas. Never mind that the United States, despite withdrawing from the UN's Paris Climate Accord, has actually reduced its CO2 emissions because it has switched from many power stations, it has switched many of its coal-fired power stations to gas. Now, remember that the chief scientist, Alan Finkel, said that if Australia stopped all its CO2 emissions tomorrow, it would make virtually no difference to the world's temperature. Meanwhile, our electricity prices continue to go through the roof. Thanks to the Australian's environment writer, Graham Lloyd, for reporting the following. He says that the Australian Power Project, which, like me, supports coal, calculates that the total taxpayer subsidies for renewable energy is a whopping $42.5 billion. During the time state and federal governments have been doling out your money to unreliable and intermittent sources of power, our electricity bills have gone up by 56%. As I mentioned last week, 10 coal-fired power stations have been closed and not replaced. The Australian Energy Market Operator has warned of blackouts this summer because the grid may not be able to cope with demand. But such is climate alarmism, despite the fact that we now have expensive and unreliable electricity, that the alarmists are going beyond electricity to other sectors of the economy. They want to cull the cattle herd and get trucks off the road. This has prompted an intervention in the climate debate by former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson. Just as politicians never warned us that the cost of signing up to the UN's climate agenda would be a 56% hike in our electricity prices, they never said anything about hurting farmers and the transport sector. This has led to a breakdown of trust.
Politicians have not levelled with us as to their real intentions. They've not warned us of the consequences. Those who have thought decarbonising of the economy is more important than an individual's job have not been prepared to go and look those people in the eye and say, decarbonising the Australian economy is more important than your job, and here's why. That breeds distrust.
We've been badly let down by the political class on both sides. They have gone along with the green flow and recklessly damaged the economy and hurt working Australians. They have not been upfront about what it is we are signing up to. The best way to send a message is to take out third-party insurance in the Senate by voting for the Conservative Party. We won't back down. We will bring conviction back to Canberra. We will take on the Greens, and we will be truthful about what our policies means. I'm Lyle Shelton. This is the Queensland Conservative. Welcome back to the Queensland Conservative. I'm Lyle Shelton. With religious freedom in post-same-sex marriage Australia under attack, it is worth considering what happens in countries where religious freedom does not exist. Asia Bibi spent 8 years on death row in Pakistan for the crime of allegedly blaspheming the Islamic prophet Muhammad. Last week, Pakistan's Supreme Court acquitted her. The Islamic extremists went nuts. They blockaded major roads and burned effigies of Bibi. Her lawyer, fearing for his life, fled the country and will now live in London. In a deal to appease the extremists, Prime Minister Imran Khan's government has imposed a travel ban on Bibi so that she cannot leave the country. This is crazy. When she is released, she will certainly be killed by the extremists the government has spent too long appeasing. Bibi's husband is calling for the US, UK or Canada to grant her asylum. Islamic extremism in our near neighbours is a big worry. Recently, Indonesia, again seeking to appease Islamic extremists, imprisoned the former Christian governor of Jakarta, a man known as Ahok. His crime? He suggested that it was okay for Muslims to vote for a non-Muslim. Again, the Islamic extremists went nuts and the government capitulated to their wishes. These extremist elements are violent and they are dangerous. While ever countries like Pakistan and Indonesia keep appeasing them, their countries remain unsafe for religious minorities like Christians. The wider world also remains unsafe when Islamic extremism flourishes. Now, while Australia is a long way from the lethal extremism of these countries, the secular left is growing more and more intolerant of Christianity here. A vicious campaign against Christian schools has begun in the wake of the same-sex marriage plebiscite. While Christian schools are demonised with the fake news they expel gay kids for being gay, the intolerant left is being appeased by the political class. Instead of tolerance and diversity, the left want everyone to conform to their worldview. They want to tell Christian schools how to be Christian. Emboldened by their win in the same-sex marriage debate, the secular left are now going after Christian schools. As the Morrison government responds to the Ruddock Review into Religious Freedom over the next few weeks, it will be interesting to see whether or not freedom is preserved or if the anti-Christian rainbow left are appeased. I'm Lyle Shelton. You're with the Queensland Conservative. I'm Lyle Shelton. Welcome back to the Queensland Conservative. History, they say, is written by the victors. Sure enough, in time to coincide with the first anniversary of the same-sex marriage plebiscite, the winning Yes campaigners have released a book giving the inside story of their victory. Fair enough, that's worth recording. I've said before that the Yes campaign won by convincing Australians there were no consequences to the change to the Marriage Act and that life would continue as normal even for the 4.7 million Australians who voted no. That is a claim that is daily proved false by anyone taking a casual glance at the news. The march of the rainbow gender fluid programs like Safe Schools becomes more aggressive by the day. Even the Queensland Education Minister, Grace Grace, has said that parents have to accept these sort of programs because of marriage equality.
No, it's not political correctness, Kyle Mad. This is reality. We've just had the biggest debate in this country about marriage equality.
The Christian school movement is in a world of pain right now, demonised perniciously and falsely as wanting to expel kids and sack teachers because they are gay. It is fake news, but the plebiscite victors, like Dr. Karen Phelps, are taking their place in the Parliament, and they are on a mission to abolish the freedom of Christian parents to educate their children in a community that reflects their faith and morals. Yes, yes, yes. The title of the book has been authored by the New South Wales state parliamentarian and same-sex marriage activist Alex Greenwich and Shirlene Robinson. Greenwich told News.com this week, quote, "I haven't spoken to Tony Abbott or Lyle Shelton since then, and if I were to, I would ask them to apologise for the appalling harm their campaign caused," end quote. Well, this is not quite true. I ran into Alex on a Qantas flight between Canberra and Sydney soon after the plebiscite. I said hello and congratulated him on his win. He didn't ask me to apologise, but I did notice he was a bit testy. I thought that was a bit odd. He won. He should have been happy. Greenwich went on to tell News.com about the Coalition for Marriage campaign, and he said this, quote, "It was a cowardly campaign that spent millions of dollars to attack and demonise the most vulnerable in our community," end quote. Perplexed, I tweeted to Greenwich, "Hi Alex, just read your comments. I'd be glad if you could detail exactly what our campaign did to cause appalling harm and what we did to demonise the most vulnerable." A few minutes later, Greenwich replied, "Our campaign was about Australia and shaping Australia as a fairer and more equal place. Your campaign was full of attack ads against the LGBTI community. You approved them and funded them, maybe watched them and talked to the kids and the families you attacked daily to find out the impact." Now, I didn't feel I could let this go through to the keeper, so I persisted in pushing for detail. "Hi again, Alex. Could you please give examples of our attack ads targeting kids and families?" Greenwich replied, "Go to your YouTube channel. If you can't understand the damage each of those videos could have on vulnerable LGBTI kids and their families, then I can't help. Maybe open it up to independent consultation to help you understand the trauma you cause many." Well, here's one of the main advertisements we aired. You can judge for yourself whether we were attacking children or demonising them.
School told my son he could wear a dress next year if he felt like it.
When same-sex marriage passes as law overseas, this type of program become widespread and compulsory.
Kids in Year 7 are being asked to role play being in a same-sex relationship.
You can say no.
Authorised by S. York, Sydney.
With nothing to support his charge of causing trauma and demonisation of children and their families, I tweeted back, "So Alex, you can't give examples of where we demonised anyone. It seems that anything we did to argue our case was illegitimate and that now we should be offered re-education." Now Alex didn't reply to that last tweet, and in fairness to him, Twitter is not the best place to have a detailed and nuanced discussion. Nevertheless, his public comments about me and the Coalition for Marriage were serious, and they were not true. I would have thought at least one example of us attacking a child could have been given. Sadly, Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals is the playbook and the modus operandi for so many of those on the left. Never engage with the arguments of your opponents. Seek to destroy their credibility. And when you win, send them to re-education camps. Meanwhile, gender-fluid programs are ramping up in schools, and Christian schools are under attack for their Christian beliefs. But hey, no consequences, the Yes campaign promised. I'm Lyle Shelton. This is the Queensland Conservative. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week.